I have worked in a few haunted places. I work in one now, currently, as a matter of fact. I work for the Ross Library, and we've had some stuff going on over there. We have noises that happen, things move around, and a lot of the time, it gets like real slow over there sometimes, okay? If anybody wants to have like the whole library themselves, between 5 and 8 on a Tuesday is a really good time to stop by. We could use the entertainment a lot of those nights, but a lot of the time, when you're working, you know when there's nobody in the stacks. And books will fall off the shelves on their own. Nobody's over there. It's just me in the building, and books will fall off. A couple of years ago, I mentioned this on a tour, and somebody asked, well, is there any connection with the books? Is there any, common thread? And I never thought of that. So I started keeping track. Turns out, yeah, every one of those books has been misfiled. Every single one of them during the time I was keeping track was in the wrong spot on the shelves. So I think probably one of the ghosts, at least, is Mary Elizabeth Crocker. She was the third longest lasting head librarian we ever had. Mary Elizabeth Crocker she took care of that library during the 30s and 40s. And she was good. She ran a tight ship. She was best known for saving a lot of books during the 36 flood. And it looks like she's probably still around there, walking around going, wrong, 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 grading our work. I got another neat one. This one involves the Lock Haven Express. I am not the first local writer to look into ghosts. In 1950, August of 1950, there was said to be a ghost up around Kettle Creek, a headless ghost. This, again, from Hero Cranmer, okay? I mentioned him earlier in connection with the Jake Hall story, the guy falling out of the chair. Like I said, Cranmer was happy to talk to anybody. So two people from the Express, there was a writer and a photographer, they went up to interview him, and he told them the story of the headless Frenchman, the ghost of a man who'd been beheaded for stealing some gold from the Native Americans. So the writer and the reporter went out, they parked the car about where the ghost was said to be seen, and they just kind of sat there to wait it out. And it was getting late, and they got out of the car, and they looked, and down by Kettle Creek, they saw a white, smoky shape with no head. It otherwise looked humanoid, but headless. And they tried to follow it as it drifted along, but it turned around and came toward them. So they ran back to the car, drove down into Renova, stopped and had a couple of shots of whiskey. As one does. Then, once they calmed down a bit, they discussed it and said, okay, if we don't come back with a photo, nobody's ever going to believe us. So, they went back, and they got out, and they went looking for it again. And it was getting late, it was getting chilly, and the wind was kicking up a little bit. And the photographer had his camera out, and they saw it again. And then, the reporter, like I said, the wind was starting to blow, so he pulled out a comb to comb his hair. And this offended the headless ghost. You have to admit, it was pretty insensitive. The ghost started coming at them pretty fast. The photographer raised his camera and took a picture, and at that point, the ghost disappeared. So they ran back into town, went back to their office, and spent the rest of the night sitting there writing it up and developing the picture. And the next morning, in August of 1950, that photo ran on the front page with a huge article, "Does Headless Frenchman's Ghost Still Haunt Kading?" So, that, I love that. That's a neat one. I stumbled upon that by accident. You'd be amazed how much of this I find when I'm looking for something else. Now, there's another one I always tell. I tell this on most of my talks and on most of my tours. This one is very special to me because this one is mine. 20 years ago this month, my wife and I moved into our home. We live up on South Fairview Street, and you know how it goes when you move. We were living out of boxes for a while, and we were getting the home organized and everything. We just signed all the papers, closed on the place. And in the house, we were hearing things. We heard noises, things moved around a bit. A lot of this initially got blamed on the dogs, but after a while, it got like a little weird, so I checked into the history of the house. And I got back as far as 1905, and I found Ida Yost. Ida was 17 years old in 1905. Her mom had died a few years before. Her older sister had moved out, leaving Ida as the oldest there. She had to drop out of school to take care of her younger sisters. Ida's dad was abusive. Matter of fact, not long after this incident, he was brought up on charges of neglect and alcoholism, and he was banned to poor Ida, who being the oldest at home pretty much took the brunt of all of this. So she couldn't handle it anymore, and at age 17, on August 19, 1905, Ida went out on my back porch and committed suicide.
Sounds good.
She was buried in Highland Cemetery beside her mom without marking. The suicide thing, And after that, her dad owned the place up until the 1920s. He passed away, her sister sold it, and over time, Ida was forgotten. And my wife and I moved in October of 2003. And we were experiencing things. We would hear footsteps on the stairs, on the hallway. We'd wake up at night and hear these loud thumps. And the funny thing is how fast you get used to this kind of thing. I still hear Ida sometimes, but a lot of the time it's when I'm up anyway, Most of the time I sleep through it now. You know how you live near like the railroad and you learn to sleep through the trains? It's the same with ghosts. At one point in those early days, in front of my wife, myself, and several guests in the house, the clock flew off the kitchen wall. At the same moment, all the cabinet doors swung open on that side of the building. That was pretty much the most dramatic thing to happen. I've gotten used to Ida, actually. Sometimes at night when everybody else is in bed, I will just kind of talk to her and say hi. If I'm watching a movie that she likes, I can tell because I hear her footsteps walking around the house. For God knows what reason, Charlie's Angels seems to be a really big one. I have very rarely put in the Charlie's Angels DVD and not heard Ida stomping around the house. She is apparently a Lucy Liu fan. The thing is, as odd as it is to say, I think we're talking about a suicide story with a happy ending here. Now, I will admit you don't get too many of those. But in this case, I think we have. After her death, Ida was pretty much forgotten. She hadn't gotten a chance to grow up and contribute yet much to our community. So she was buried in Highland Cemetery, and most people forgot she ever existed. So, in 2003, I dug up information about her. I've written about her several times, as a matter of fact. I just had an article in the Express the day before yesterday. People know about her now. People care about Ida and her story. I mentioned her on a lot of my tours. People come to me, bump into me in the grocery store and ask if how Ida's doing, as if I've seen her lately. Every time I write about her, I get people driving by real slow, looking at your window, want to see the haunted house. And let me tell you, you do not want to forget to mention to your wife that you've written about Ida on the front page. I've had that happen. She's sitting there watching TV. She's like, why is everybody driving by the house real slow? What's going on? Oh, right. Funny you should bring that up. These days, my wife's pretty much used to this from me. But Ida is known now. She's cared for by the community. A couple of years ago, I got an email from a young woman named Tiffany Bowden down in Tennessee. She had been cruising the used book sales, and she found an old copy of Black Beauty of all things. And it had some words scribbled in, old drawings in pencil, and a name scribbled over and over again, Miss Ida Yost. So she looked up Ida online, found some of my articles, and mailed the book back to me. After almost a century, Ida had her favorite book back in the house finally. Maybe most important of all, A few years ago, when I was able to document, I found the paperwork to document where Ida had been buried in Highland Cemetery, up in the family plot beside her mom, and I paid to put a marker in. I contracted a marker and I had it put there just to mark her grave. So Ida finally has a marked grave up in Highland Cemetery. You know, we've grown used to Ida, and I think she likes having us around. I think these days Ida feels this, that she gets the support she never did in life, that the community cares for her, and she's now got a family in the house that also cares for her. I think she likes having us around. You know, me and my wife, our dogs, my son, who when he was little referred to Ida as his sister ghost. I also got a lot of, Daddy, Ida spilled my orange juice. So after all these years, I think Ida feels supported, finally. After all this time, I think Ida is finally content.